If you had a post-Einsteinian physics project, you would want 3 subspecialties for sure. That would be differential geometry, which is the basis for originally general relativity. In 1976, 75, 2 guys named C.N. Yang and Jim Simons, who Jim Simons becomes the world's greatest hedge fund manager, figure out that quantum field theory is also based on geometry, but it's a different version of differential geometry. So that's one specialty that you would want. Second specialty that you would want would be particle theory or high energy physics, however you want to say it. The third specialty you'd want is general relativity. So if you wanted to detect whether we had a secret Manhattan Project, but it wasn't identifiable by a building because we didn't announce its existence, you'd say, is there anything that eats those 3 specialties, unless you believe that there's a secret university system? Because we have lists of everybody who gets produced with a PhD in these fields. If that was the case, the 2 places that you would have a secret place would be Austin, which is the successor to the Institute for Field Physics at the University of Texas, Austin Gravitational Group, General Relativistic Group, which has had Archibald Wheeler, Steven Weinberg, Bryce DeWitt. This is a powerhouse of a place that you happen to live in, and you should have these people who are the successors to these people on, because most of these people have died. But the more spectacular place would be Pawtucket, Long Island. The State University of New York at Stony Brook has an astounding collection of monster minds. And it's not highly regarded as a university. I mean, it's strong, but you would have no idea how strong this place is. It's got multiple Fields medalists. It's got an institute called the Center for Geometry, Simon Center for Geometry and Physics. C.N. Yang, who's arguably the greatest living theoretical physicist, is at this university. He's 101 years old, so he's pretty much on his way out, but this is where he's called home. And it's not advertised as the powerhouse that it is. So shout out to the State University of New York at Stony Brook. If I was going to locate a Manhattan Project in plain sight and get U.S. News and World to report this as a minor player in research, that's where I'd go. But more importantly, and this is the really weird thing, and again, I don't want to spread this as a rumor, but I am saying this, if you wanted to imagine that the government wasn't incompetent and we actually had great people on this project, my friend and advisor who's now died, Isidore Singer, once said to me, he said, the world's greatest mathematics and physics department is Renaissance Technologies. And I said, what? Didn't make any sense to me. It's great people, but it's a hedge fund. Okay, so you've got this weird thing where you've got 3 basic institutions that are very closely intertwined. You've got Brookhaven National Laboratory. You've got State University of New York at Stony Brook, a mid-level university with an out-of-this-world math and physics program. And you've got a hedge fund that makes more money than anybody can possibly imagine. Like, there used to be 4 fortunes in hedge funds that didn't make any sense. One was D.E. Shaw, one was Bernie Madoff, one was Jeff Epstein, and one was Renaissance Technologies.
Whoa.
And I guessed that Bernie Madoff had a legitimate business and an illegitimate business, and he was front-running the legitimate business with his illegitimate business. So he was effectively stealing from his own clients in 2 separate in one division. One was the theft, one was the dupes. I got that wrong. He was just running a Ponzi scheme, so shame on me. But I was giving talks about, there's BlackRock and Blackstone as investment groups. And I was going around in the early 2000s talking about Black Arts Capital. I would give talks on Black Arts Capital. We'd tell you what we're doing, but we'd have to kill you. And that was a reference to Madoff and Epstein, because Epstein's fortune made no sense, right? Renaissance has existed in its medallion fund for decades, has turned in a performance never seen by anything else remotely, effectively just a money printing machine. No one knows how it works. I've met with Jim Simons one-on-one for 3 hours, and because his wife is an economist, my wife is an economist, I'm a differential geometer, he's a differential geometer, I gave him this entire theory that all of modern neoclassical economics is actually differential geometric. And 3 hours later, he's been chain smoking, he smokes like a chimney, never wears socks, very eccentric guy, brilliant as the day is long, still alive, go get him for a guest. He says, "Wow, Eric, that's brilliant. If you knew what we were actually doing, you'd be very disappointed." He said, "I never thought of this." Now, a little while later, I don't know if you know who Brian Keating is. He's a professor at UCSD. He's an experimentalist. Jim is basically his uncle. And he calls me out to Santa Barbara. And Jim is having dinner at his brother's house. And what you guys don't know about Jim Simons is that with a guy named S.S. Chern, he came up with something called the Chern-Simons function, or Chern-Simons functional, where if you differentiate this thing the way you differentiate the Einstein-Hilbert functional, you get an equation that looks very similar to the Einstein field equation for gravity, only it looks a lot more like particle theory. So I told Jim, I said, I don't know if you know this or you don't know this, but I think you're sitting on top of a piece of the puzzle that supersedes general relativity. And on the spot, he asked me whether I wanted to come out to the State University of New York at Stony Brook for a year to work on this. We had like a very technical conversation. Jim Simons is potentially, beyond brilliant, but also has a claim on a part of what I believe is going to supersede general relativity by imitating the Einstein-Hilbert action from which the Einstein field equations are derived. This thing generates something which you would call the Chern-Simons equation. Ed Witten gets the Fields Medal for quantizing this thing that looks like gravity, but is actually sort of particle theoretic.